Welcome, everyone, friends all. I'm Angela Thomas. I'm the current chair of the DUCO Dems. And I want to thank all of you who are attending here tonight, and those of you on YouTube who may or may not be out there. But you'll see that when we do the recording later. I want to welcome our four candidates: John Pedora, Karen Breslin, Tisha Calvarese, and Ike McCorkle. I want to thank you for your willingness to participate in this forum tonight. I think this might be a historic moment of four candidates in Congressional District 4. I'm not certain that that's happened, at least not in the history I know, going back a few years. I also want to thank our moderator, Lisa Chalet. Lisa is the brilliant CD4 chair who has been beside us all the way getting this organized. I also want to recognize some other people in the room tonight. One of them is what I consider the epitome of my success as the DUCO Dems chair, and that is the election of HD 43 Representative Bob Marcy. He did the work. I just take the accolades. And I also want to recognize Alyssa Nalimo, who is our HD 44. And I will just say this, and this is off the record, I'm not the chair of the DUCO Dems right now, and myself as the county commissioner candidate. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Chalet, who will begin our forum. Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Of course, your first job as congressional representative is to defend the Constitution. For this forum, please remember you are representing Coloradans in CD4, and we expect that those we elect are our voices, not their own. Answer the questions with this in mind. So with that, I will start with 1-minute introductions, starting with Mr. McCorkle.
Thank you so much. My name is Ike McCorkle. I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, Purple Heart recipient, proud father of 4, lifelong Democrat. I've been the 2020 and the 22 nominee. In 2020, we won 37% of the vote. In 2022, the district shifted from an R+12 district to an R+21. We maintained 37% of the vote, which represents a significant increase in Democratic turnout in the district. And it's because we moderated our message. We followed Adam Frisch's lead, and we campaigned to the constituents that we need to win this district. I'm Ike, retired Marine, and I think that I have a solid chance of winning back the 30% of voters that we have lost since Betsy Markey's 2008 election.
All right, Ms. Calvarese, 1 minute.
Hi everyone, my name is Trisha Calvarese. I'm a Colorado native and I was raised in Highlands Ranch. I went to Douglas County Public Schools, which led to an academic scholarship at the Johns Hopkins University. I was most recently working in Washington as the director of speechwriting at the AFL-CIO and as a second-generation member of the Federal Civil Service working at the National Science Foundation. When I got a call, that changed everything. I was able to drop everything thanks to my union and come home and provide end-of-life care for my parents who passed away days apart in the comfort of their home. And now I am stepping up to make it easier for all of you to take care of your families, for your economic security, for the future of American innovation, and to defend our democracy. Thank you.
Ms. Breslin, 1 minute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Breslin. I'm a political science professor, a lawyer, a former journalist covering Congress and the executive branch. I'm here today because I spent decades studying American foreign policy, American public policy, and I am deeply concerned, like many of you are, about this health of our democracy. And we're not going to be able to turn back the forces dedicated to defeating and destroying our democracy unless we stand with vulnerable people, unless we defend the interests of working people in this country. And this district is a clear example of that. Douglas County does really well in all of the national rankings. The other part of the district, not so much. We have people going to bed without enough food. We have people lacking homes. We have people lacking health care. We have people lacking access to education. All of that needs to change if we're going to save our democracy. Now more than ever, protecting our democracy means making sure that everybody's got a stake in this system. And right now, Trump and people like that are convincing them that they are the answer. We need to convince people that we're the answer. Thank you.
Mr. Podora, 1 minute.
Good evening, Douglas County. My name's John Podora. I'm a husband, I'm an environmental scientist, I'm a manufacturing engineer, and I live in Severance, Colorado, which is in Weld County, about 20 minutes east of Fort Collins, with my wife and my 3 children. I decided to run for this seat to take on Ken Buck and his brand of conservative extremism, or what I perceived at the time. My oh my, how the tides have changed. But I'll tell you what, the goal remains the same. We need to inspire hope within our communities, and we really need to provide the people of CD4 an alternative choice. We need to push forward. I had the unique privilege of growing up both in Pennsylvania and Colorado. During the remote work boom, I moved out here a few years ago with my family, and I've never looked back. I have over a decade of campaign experience. I've worked with the Biden campaign in 2020 and beyond. I believe that my campaign experience and my experience growing up in rural America will bring a significant shift to this race. And I'm running for Congress because I believe that together we can rebuild the American dream. Sorry about that. We can rebuild the American dream and renew the middle class for generations to come. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to read the first question, and the first question starts with you, Ike, and then you will each have 90 seconds to respond. We are lucky in Colorado to have freedom of choice for women's reproductive health care. What will you do to ensure women's reproductive care freedom for the rest of the country?
This is a very deeply personal question for me. I have a 14-year-old daughter. I was raised by a tough single mother. I have a sister, and I believe that every American citizen should have autonomy over their own medical decisions. They should be being made by a patient and a doctor, not a lawyer or a judge or a magistrate. And I fundamentally believe that the task at hand is to create the coalitions in the United States Congress that we need, a broad enough coalition, to pass a federal protection for the right to choose and to protect everyone's right to access to medical care and to reproductive health care. So again, this is extremely personal to me because me, like all of you, have many women in our families that we care deeply for and that who deserve to have rights and autonomy over their own medical decisions.
Ms. Calabrese, 90 seconds.
When my mom was living in rural Sterling, Colorado, she had to have an emergency procedure to remove an ectopic pregnancy. It saved her life, and it made mine possible. Now that we live in a post-Roe world, there are state governments interfering with those medical decisions. We are seeing state governments criminalizing miscarriages. We are seeing governments traumatizing rape and incest survivors. We are seeing state governments make up medical procedures. The backbone of the American economy is strong families. And strong families start with a woman's right to choose, and the government should have nothing to do with that. So I will do everything I can to ensure federal protections for abortions while expanding care. That's prenatal care, postnatal care. Republicans just cut WIC, that's women, infant, and children nutrition supplementals, right? So restoring that and making sure that access is available in our underserved communities, including in rural Colorado.
Erin?
I think it's really important to understand that abortion is connected to the status of women overall. These attacks on abortion rights and women's bodily autonomy would not be possible if there weren't other attacks on the status of women in society. If we're going to fight these kinds of laws, women have to take charge of the dialogue and really get ourselves out there and vote and be active and demand laws that will protect our rights. Relative to a federal abortion ban, that's going to take obviously legislation. It might also take a constitutional amendment. And I will support any federal legislation that gives women autonomy over choices like this. In Idaho, as Trish was saying, for example, a woman who discovers that her pregnancy is not going to be viable, she may not be able to do anything about it. And those kinds of choices, as everyone has so far said, really should be between the woman and her doctor. Thank you.
So, in my opinion, on day one, what we can do to kind of push back on this is defeat whichever one of the 11 extremist Republican candidates is running for this office. If we defeat them, we know that we can advocate for this message. It's my belief that no elected official has the right to tell my wife, my daughter, or any woman in America what they can and cannot do with their own bodies. I think our Supreme Court was wrong. I think that system's broken, but I think that Congress can do so much more to codify the right to choose. And I just know that I'll be a strong voice for that from day one, and that starts by defeating whichever extremist candidate wins the nomination.
All right, we're going to the second question, and we'll start with you, Tricia. The US Department of Education is being attacked by Republicans and conservatives all over America. What do you believe the role of the Department of Education is, and what will you do to stop the attacks against it as they come up in Congress?
I mean, good governance, first of all, right? They're holding our government hostage on a made-up border crisis where you're not funding the Department of Education, so it's harder for them to do their jobs. That's where millions of people, right, were delayed in seeking the, FAFSA forms. I would also make it illegal for for-profit schools to drain our federal dollars away from our public education. Again, I went to Fox Creek, Crest Hill Middle School, and Highlands Ranch High School, and that public education made it possible for me to get an academic scholarship to the Johns Hopkins University. We need more of that. We need to better connect our education system to employment outcomes. So I would also encourage the Department of Education to work closer with organized labor for traditional trades as well as for the industries of the future. We cannot have, my whole generation is saddled by debt. We need ways to resolve that and to make sure that my generation can earn an income that can support a family. Not one job, but one job only, not four.
Well, certainly public education is critically important. I attended public schools, I've attended public universities. We absolutely need to support that to the greatest extent of our ability, and I think that means more federal funding, fundamentally. We also need to support students and their ability to accomplish what they want to achieve in their lives. We're all going to benefit from that. And that means student loans, it means stipends, it means forgiving student debt. All of that needs to happen in order for students to be able to get on with the lives that they want to lead. Right now, I teach at the university and students are working full-time and they're taking a full load of classes and it's an unbearable burden for them. That needs to stop. And I don't know much of a way around it without providing additional funding at the federal level. So I would support that. I would support any kind of relief that students can get to allow them to really accomplish their professional and trade-oriented objectives.
So in my personal opinion, the role of the Department of Education is to ensure the highest level of quality education for everybody in America, regardless of your zip code. And that starts all the way at the bottom and goes all the way to when you're in college. I believe that the Department of Education can also exercise more measures to help make college more affordable to people and definitely integrate themselves more. As someone who graduated from a trade school, a 4-year college is not for everyone, and the Department of Education can put these checks and balances in place to make sure that the quality of education for all far exceeds what it is now. And I would echo the same thing, that we need more federal funding to do so, and nothing's going to change until that happens.
Well, I think everyone has said it pretty well. I think that the purpose of the Department of Education is to, like John said, make sure that every single American citizen has access to an equitable investment in their education. And that means that every single pupil in the United States should have an equitable amount of dollars invested in their education. And if we talk for just a minute about the district that we're trying to win, you can see that that is simply not the case in Congressional District 4. When you go out into rural counties like Yuma County, they've reduced the number of days of education available to the students in those counties. They only get 4 days of school a week. That's not equitable. It's also not equitable for the students in Aspen, Colorado, to have $6,000 to $8,000 annually invested in their education, while in Lake County, just next door, you have around $2,000 invested in each pupil's education. And so I think we need a federal Equitable Investment in Education Act, and I would support that. And I want to echo everything else my colleagues up here, my peers have said. We need education not just in academics, but in trade schools. We need education in construction. We need education in environmental infrastructure installation programs to address the environmental crisis. And I think that investment in education is the most important thing that the United States government can possibly do.
For the third question, we will start with Karen. Are you familiar with the Colorado Consumer Repair Bill of Rights, which was the first and only in the nation when Governor Polis signed it into law in April 2023? This law legally protects farmers' rights to fix their own equipment, requiring the manufacturers to provide tools, parts, embedded software, firmware, or documentation needed for repairs. How will you support the expansion of this law throughout the rest of the country?
It would just have to be through federal legislation. I think that's a fairly simple question. And beyond that, I don't really know how else it could be done. I think it would take a federal law to do it, and I'd be happy to try to introduce that or co-sponsor it with others.
So as the grandson of a farmer, I spent easily the first 16 years of my life on the farm in southeastern Pennsylvania with my grandfather. I spent multiple mornings at the diner with him and other farmers, and I learned firsthand a lot of these problems. I saw what it's like for these farmers in rural America to really, really struggle, to not have the finances that they need to be able to repair their equipment or to invest in their farms or to train, agricultural employees. So I think that Colorado, like usual, is a national leader, and I think that legislation can be replicated on the federal level, and we can be a strong voice to pass that nationally in DC. But the biggest part of the conversation is just showing up, sitting down with these farmers and these folks on the rural counties and the Eastern Plains, and asking them what exactly they need, how we could improve that bill, and how we could be a strong voice for them in Washington. I've lived it because I've seen it firsthand how both major political parties have abandoned rural folks for generations. And I can tell you that if I'm elected, I'll be a strong voice for rural America.
So, as many of you probably know, one of our state representatives, Brianna Titone, championed the state's right to repair bill, which granted our farmers the right to repair their equipment and to have their equipment repaired at non-industry facilities, which makes it a competitive market where farm equipment is not the farm equipment and the repair of that equipment is not gouged by the industries that produce that equipment. I would champion, and I'm already speaking directly with Brianna Titone about passing a federal right to repair bill that would grant that to all United States farmers. And I think that's how we can address this issue and make sure that farming is a lucrative industry for farmers and ranchers and cattle producers, not just for big agri-monopolies like meat packing plants. That if you understand like the market system, the price of beef right now that we're paying at the store is as high as it's ever been. But when you go out and you talk to the cattlemen and the ranchers in Congressional District 4, they're getting gouged. They're getting paid less than they've ever made, for, dollars on the hoof of meat that they produce, while the price of beef is as high as it's ever been. We need to address the problems with big agri-monopolies, and that's how we solve this problem, by passing a federal right to repair bill.
Over the past 30 years, our leaders in both parties gave up America's leadership in manufacturing. Also at stake right now, there are efforts to reshore, certainly, but also at stake is the future of innovation. We need to be investing more dollars in research, in discovery, and making sure that it is made in America and that it is made locally. I think that a right to repair bill is fantastic federally, and we should go further. We have a right to know for any smart device that has a chip in it, where's that data going? Who has access to it? We should also have a nutrition label. Every single part of it, where did it come from in the supply chain? Was it made with slave labor from Uyghurs in China? Consumers have a right to know. We also certainly have a right to upcycle, to repair. I think that we should take our trash, pieces that don't work, give them to high school students. Let's create competitions and see what they can make. We need a new generation of engineers, and I think that this is exactly a way we can start to inspire them. It's part of the new economy, so I am all for it, and I would certainly bring it to the federal level.
Okay, John?
I think.
Yeah, we're on number 4. Okay, water is a critical resource in Colorado. Almost all the water in Colorado comes from the Colorado River Basin. 80% of usage from the Colorado River Basin is for agricultural purposes. What will you do in Congress to ensure Coloradans have this precious resource now and into the future?
Oh, I'm so glad that I got this question. So as an environmental scientist, I have a specialization in geospatial technology and climate change mitigation. And this is an issue that I've studied extensively. And I'll tell you what, we have to get super creative to ensure that Colorado has a sustainable water future. And that's going to take a multi-billion-dollar investment. We need to explore things like building desalination plants on the Californian coast and creating an articulation agreement with them, building a massive pipeline that would put tens of thousands of workers, that are earning top dollar union wages, and pipe that water right out to our counties in the Eastern Plains and replenish the Colorado River Basin. We also need to get super creative and look at things like cloud seeding, because our climate is changing, we're failing to meet the thresholds, and unless we get creative, we're not going to have a sustainable water future. And I can tell you that I'll use my STEM background to advocate for this at every possible turn.
So I think I 100% agree with what John has said, that we do need to stand up massive desalination processes on our coastlines and pump that water inland. We also need to take advantage of other types of technology that exist, like atmospheric condensate, that a company down in Arizona produces a solar panel that uses a solar power to run a condenser and actually take water right out of the atmosphere and then drip feed the crops below. And that's the type of technology that we need to have installed, all across the Eastern Plains and Congressional District 4, so that our farmers have water to drip feed their crops and to grow shade crops. That's the type of investment that we need, because as much as we want to talk about doing these types of massive projects and pipelines, we have to actually create a coalition in the United States Congress and run it through the Congressional Budget Office and get it funded, because if you don't get that type of thing funded, it's never going to get installed. And so I support advanced technological solutions that'll put Coloradans and Americans to work on solving the problems that the climate crisis is presenting us with, which is, significantly more arid conditions in Colorado and across the Southwest.
Due to the Colorado River Compact, most of the water in Colorado has to leave the state. So when it goes to Arizona, to a farm owned by Saudi Arabia that is growing water-intensive alfalfa during a drought, that's a problem for all of us. So I applaud Arizona for preventing it, and we need to have federal protections that complement it. And on a more local level, we need to stop outside developers from trying to use your taxpayer dollars to drain our farmland. Are you kidding me? What was the company? The RWR. So make sure you're going to vote for Angela. Shout out to the county commissioners who voted against that horrible plan, right? So that's kind of on the defense. On the offense, we have a big opportunity with the Farm Bill, right? So we need to make sure our farmers do have what they need. We need to transition away from water-intensive crops and have income supplements for those farmers, where we're going to ask them to stop growing things that are not native, like corn. Other things too, of updating our water infrastructure, right? Especially if we're going to compete for the next century, get rid of the one from the last. So again, the Farm Bill is a big deal and a big opportunity.
I think that what we need is agriculture that is much more efficient in terms of its water use, and that's agriculture that is much more biodiverse, much less reliant on chemicals, much more small producer oriented. And I think that that's going to be the answer. Big projects are not the answer, because you can't do any of that without destroying the environment. There's a basic reality here, which is that we're out of water. The Colorado River Compact was entered into when water levels were quite high. The dams were created in historic high water conditions. We have to face facts here. And we also have to be real about the water usage that goes on unnecessarily. So how do we get a handle on water conservation? How do we direct agriculture dollars, federal dollars, toward more sustainable water saving kind of agricultural practices? And the Farm Bill is a piece of that. Many of you probably know this, but a significant proportion of Farm Bill money goes to large producers. It's an overwhelming amount of money, in fact. So we need to find different ways to support a more sustainable use of water, and I oppose any kind of trans-basin diversions such as is occurring in dewatering the Eastern Plains. That needs to stop, but it's not really a federal issue, because water rights in Colorado are controlled by Colorado law, not by the federal government.
There's 2 mics over there, right? All right, back starting with you, Ike. As a strong player in Central Europe, Ukraine is critical to the democratic world in stopping Russian aggression. Do you support continued funding to Ukraine, and why or why not?
I fully support providing the Democratic Republic of Ukraine with absolutely everything that they need in assistance and in direct in dollar assistance and within military advising in order to ensure that, like Lisa mentioned, that they defeat the Russian Federation's illegal invasion of their sovereign territory. We've all seen the atrocious actions that have taken place there. We have to ensure that we support them with everything they need to win, because they are the front line in the fight for worldwide democracy. Democracies all across the globe are in danger and threatened, whether it's Viktor Orban or whether it's dictators like Xi Jinping or dictators like Vladimir Putin. We have to ensure that Taiwan is safe. We have to ensure that the Democratic Republic of Ukraine is supported with everything that they need to defeat the Russian Federation, because they are the buffer between the NATO alliance and the Russian Federation. If the Russian Federation defeats Ukraine, NATO forces are going to be eyeball to eyeball with the Russian Federation. And, you know, Hitler didn't stop when he invaded the Sudetenland, and Putin will not stop when he invaded Georgia or Chechnya.
Wrap it up.
To echo Zelensky before the World Economic Forum, which European nation has an army ready to take on Putin? And how many of our soldiers do we want to send to Ukraine? Either we arm Ukraine right now with everything they need, or we are going to be facing a NATO conflict. And moreover, China's watching. If we're inconsistent with our support for Ukraine, it is only going to encourage them, especially given the election in Taiwan, where congratulations to them for again supporting the Democratic Party. So arm them now, give them everything that they need. Slava Ukraini, and I speak as someone of a Slavic heritage. I feel that in my bones. So Slava Ukraine, all the way.
I would love to see Ukraine protected, liberated, but we've lost about 500,000 people in this conflict already. And we've spent, I think, now close to $100 billion. I would like to see the US Defense Department, Secretary of State, whomever else, provide a roadmap for Ukraine being able to prevail. I am not convinced, as at least two of my colleagues are, that Russia is hell-bent on aggression beyond Ukraine. And I say this as a scholar of international relations. There's deep debate about that basic reality. And I will also remind folks that government is not above lying about conditions. Let's think back to Vietnam. Let's think back to weapons of mass destruction. Let's think back to the babies taken out of incubators in Kuwait that prompted us to go into that particular war. We used to know that war was wrong. We used to know that war cost people their lives unnecessarily, innocent lives. And this war has already taken a huge toll. I would support Ukraine and funding for Ukraine if there's a clear path to victory and the government can explain what that path is. I have not seen that yet.
This is one of the biggest fundamental issues of our time. We have to support Ukraine unanimously. Now is the time. We need to divert all the resources possible. I'll be a strong voice to get them whatever they need. Russia is an evil empire. They are carrying out acts of aggression. They are going to go into other European countries. They have always been an evil country, and they will always continue to do so. Ukraine is on the right side of history, so the question that everybody needs to ask is, what side of history would we like to be on? I don't want to be on the side of the evil empire. I want to be on the side of the people that are defending their homeland. And it has broken my heart to watch it from day one, Ukrainian men, women, and children being slaughtered, while certain Americans push back and question the morality behind us funding it, or the money could go elsewhere. We can cut billions of dollars from our defense budget spending. I've worked as a subcontractor for the Department of Defense for years. There's billions of dollars in waste. If we want to arm them, we need to do it now, because they are the buffer zone between NATO and Russia spreading their cancer to the rest of the world.
Okay, starting with you, Tricia. You know, another light topic. Immigration reform is important to our country and our citizens. Immigrants are critical workers in many industries, while others just want to eliminate it altogether. If you could do one thing to improve our immigration issues, what would that be?
As long as there is a workforce that can be exploited simply for their legal status, it hurts every person who has to work for a living. And to echo what Lisa said, Immigrants are not the problem. Immigrants got us through COVID in meatpacking plants on farms, taking care of families. Immigrants are not the problem, it is the system. We need a clear path to citizenship. We need to bring people into the fold. Go ahead and tax them. We need to reunite families. And let me say this, we're in a global competition for STEM talent. We want to remain a place that is welcoming for the best and the brightest, because that is what has always made us great.
Well, this is a very complicated issue, and I have had the situation of looking into the eyes of people who have risked their lives to get into this country, crossing into Arizona during summer heat, treacherous terrain. The migrants that we are trying to deal with right now are some of the most desperate people on the planet, and our policies should be humane, and our policies should facilitate them merging into the workforce, temporary protective status. I would never support further militarization of the border. I would never support more brutalization of vulnerable people. And that is the path that we seem to be headed on as a result of Republican pressure and Biden wanting to bend to that pressure as a result of Ukrainian aid. That is an immoral policy. The United States has contributed to the conditions in Latin America, both through our drug use and also through our fiscal policies, in our trade policies. We have imposed sanctions on Venezuela, and their inflation rate is at something like 400%. We think we're uncomfortable with 5, 6, 7%, whatever we're at now, 3%. Imagine 400% inflation and how you'd feed your children with that. So we have a responsibility to deal with the migrant population. We have a moral responsibility to do that. And I will never stand for further militarization or brutalization of vulnerable people.
Definitely not a light topic, is it? I kind of come in the middle a little bit with this, and I'll tell you why. The border is very porous. The border does not need more militarization, but we need to create entry points. We need to make sure that people have much easier access to our country. My family came here from southern Italy in the mid-1900s. They got on a boat with all of their money and all of their belongings. They walked into the country and they signed their name on the book and they were legal immigrants. That's not the case anymore. I've met immigrants that have come here both legally and illegally, and the sacrifices that they've had to make just to get here, just to live that opportunity to create the American dream for their family, it's so far out of reach and it's so inhumane. I do agree that the militarization needs to stop, but we do need to secure our borders. We need to funnel them through so that we can vet people more efficiently than we are now. And we need to create a culture in America that defeats the Republican extremism and the folks that would put that would booby trap the Rio Grande River with barbed wire and devices to make children and women drown on their way in. That is the most immoral thing I could possibly imagine. And so I'll use my voice to constantly advocate for these folks that are just trying to get a piece of the American dream.
Thank you for the question. I think that we need to stay laser focused on how we win Congressional District 4. And I just came back from this weekend from the Colorado Cattlemen's Association's Midwinter Conference, where I met cattlemen. I met with the board of directors, submitted an endorsement request, and I met with cattlemen from all over the Eastern Plains, from all of our 21 counties. And those cattlemen, and I believe this was part of the question, is what would you do immediately, or what would you do to solve part of the problem? Well, the problem that the cattlemen have communicated to me is that they don't have enough workers to harvest their crops. They don't have enough workers to process their cattle or their beef. And so the immediate thing that I would do is to work with my colleagues in the United States Congress to ensure that we have a more sustainable and extended work visa program to let these folks come in, to document them appropriately, like John said, and make sure that we have people to harvest our crops, that we have people in meat packing plants to process our beef and chicken and pork. These are the solutions that I think that we need to form in the United States Congress, and the only way we can do that is by forming coalitions and working with our fellow congressional representatives to get it done.
Karen. Ready? Yeah, Karen, yours first. Another light topic. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children under the age of 17. How will you make our country safer?
Well, the assault weapons ban needs to be reinstated. That's a given. The rise in mass shootings does correlate with the expiration of the assault weapons ban. So that seems to be a wise step to take. Handgun violence, though, is the primary cause of gun violence in the United States. What do you do about that? I think something like buyback programs might help, but I would also recommend increasing the amount of spending that we do on gun violence as a problem. Among the public health problems that this country faces, gun violence is poorly studied. And so when you try to formulate policy solutions to that, there isn't good evidence. It's equivocal evidence at best. And so I think that putting some money into trying to understand the gun violence problem is really necessary. We have so many guns in the United States, it's just remarkable. And I don't know any other way to deal with that except to try to get some of those guns out of circulation, and also to deal with mental health and other kinds of conditions, and to think deeply about what prompts people to engage in gun violence. I mean, we have a culture that's awash in violence. You can't watch a movie without somebody being shot, and usually in a very graphic way. I think that's a conversation to have. And as a politician, as an elected official, that's a conversation I could initiate. And I would begin to try to understand why our entertainment is awash in violence. People of a certain age know that that has not always been the case. And I can't help but believe that it has a role in the way violence is so widely accepted among just, everyday people.
So I would like to start off this conversation by saying that I'm a certified machining and manufacturing instructor for firearms. I teach for a school that primarily instructs veterans, active duty folks on safe practices dealing with firearms. Also, as someone who's grown up in rural America my entire life, I can tell you that I've grown up around folks with AR-15s my entire life, family members, friends. I'm not going to support an assault weapon ban here in CD4. I think that it's divisive. In my conversation with folks throughout the district, we have a very gun-centric culture here in CD4, and I think that that's not going to be a winning message. What I do think is a winning message is to take a holistic approach. We can create national red flag gun laws. We can raise the minimum purchase age to 21. We can create mandatory classes for folks to have to go through, like the classes that I teach that talk about, how to safely operate and work on firearms. And we also need to expand our psychological and background checks. We can integrate something like that without taking firearms away from folks. Look at what we go through just to get our driver's license. Do you mean to tell me that, we can't have just as stringent of a process to obtain firearms? Of course that's going to create division. But I do think that we need to focus on what works here in CD4, how conservative of a district it is, and the message that they're going to use against us is that we're coming to take their guns, and we need to nip that before it starts.
Awesome.
This is another topic that is deeply personal to me. If you guys don't know, my eldest son, Isaac Jr., he's sitting right back in the back of the room right now. He was in class a few doors down when the STEM Highlands Ranch shooting happened. And Kendrick Castillo lost his life that day, tragically as a hero, stopping that tragic incident from occurring. We have to make sure that kids don't have access to guns. So I would champion first a National Safe Storage Act so that every gun owner has a biometric capable safe that is federally subsidized, and we make safe storage the law. It would not only reduce school shootings by better than 70%, because 70+% of school shootings happen because kids have access to improperly stored firearms. It would also reduce suicides. It would also reduce accidental injuries that happen when kids are playing with guns in homes where they're improperly stored. I think this is something that we can work across the aisle on. No parent, no child should ever have to fear going into their classroom or their place of education or their home due to firearms. I agree with my, peer down here, John, that a assault weapons ban is very divisive, and in Congressional District 4, we will not win an election running on supporting an assault weapons ban.
Let's take on the NRA and their political influence. And I also think we need to roll back the special protection on gun manufacturers, right? You want to talk about evidence. Let's go after them like big pharma and opioids. Let's go after them like we did with big tobacco and the cigarette companies, right? Like that's a start. Let's start there. When I was in high school, I interviewed Brooks Brown, who was a friend of the Columbine shooters. And this was in the early 2000s, right? And he said the whole point was for lost boys to have a weapon. And he said, mark my words, this is going to happen over and over and over again. So we need to also reapproach how we deal with bullying in schools. We need better support networks for our kids. And guns are a part of the American West. Any first-time user needs to have a training class, needs to know how to operate a gun. And I'm with John and Ike on we need to reach folks across the aisle, right? Like we don't want to be even more divisive. I've lived in rural America. So I think that we can continue on the path of common sense gun control.
Final question before you close. So John, if Democrats still hold a minority, please no, after the 2024 election, how do you plan to accomplish any of the things that Coloradans and Americans expect of you?
Wow, there is no easy answer to that, is there? If we are in the minority, the reality is we're dealing with a completely dysfunctional Republican Party. They have zero interest in advancing the needs of Coloradans or Americans. And I think that we need to recognize that. So I think the goal should be centric around this time of doing whatever it takes to ensure that we have the majority. And I'm very confident that we are going to win that majority. What I can tell you is that I've grown up, like I said, 3 or 4 times now in rural America my entire life. My grandfather was a dedicated Republican. I know how to communicate with these folks, and I know that bipartisanship is so toxic and it's so hard, but I think that with the right person, the right message, the right background, we can find folks on the other side of the aisle to at least constantly advocate with, to team up, to partner, to create some good solid legislation, to compromise, because if we're in the minority, everything's going to be a compromise. But like I said in 2020, I was very confident then that Biden was going to get elected. I was very confident that we were going to take the majority, and I've never been more confident that 2024 is going to produce the same results.
Thanks again for the question. I think that this is probably one of the things that I've addressed already in a couple of my statements, but the only way you get anything done in Congress is by compromise, and it's by creating coalitions, it's by reaching across the aisle, and it's by, having the tough conversations around the divisive issues that exist, whether it's firearms or whether it's energy policy. But we have to create personal relationships on the other side of the aisle. And we have to find those individual Republicans that do retain enough common sense to work with us to pass legislation. And I think that's the primary task of leadership today, is to send someone to the United States Congress that is competent, that is capable of communicating across the aisle and compromising to get legislative objectives accomplished, even if we are in the minority.
The Farm Bill, that's definitely a bipartisan effort for one. And you know what? Ken Buck actually had a pretty good piece of legislation moving on breaking up big tech. I would totally support that, as well as his idea to ban members of Congress from owning and trading stock. That's a huge one. There's also a bipartisan committee It's the Chinese Communist Party Select Committee. Now, this isn't anti-Sino. It is a fact that the Chinese Communist Party has a a trillion or billion dollar plan for a Made in China initiative. We need to work together, especially in the era of AI, to make sure the industries of the future are discovered here, are invented here, and are made in America. That message crosses all across the political spectrum. So that is something I would absolutely go into Congress looking to do. I was in DC for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. I helped message it. I come from the labor movement. Those are folks all across the political spectrum, as well as the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. So I would, regardless of who's in the majority or minority, we need to make progress for our families.
I agree with everyone else that bipartisanship is essential to try to move any of these issues off go. And I also believe that there are issues around which we can find common cause. And I think rural issues in particular are likely to be areas where there can be some bipartisan agreement. But I also think that we need to step up and really put pressure on the Republicans through a strong, concerted public outreach on issues that matter to us. Take on the NRA, as Tricia says. For example, if we've got a policy fight that we really need to fight, we have to go to the American people about that. We can't just let the Republicans control the dialogue. I don't know if people watched the results last night, but the kinds of things that are coming out of the mouths of those people on that side of that aisle, they're horrifying. And we've got to speak up and oppose that kind of language. And I think that if we go to the American people directly, aggressively, with our concerns, and really kind of prick people's moral consciousness, we can change the dialogue around some of these contentious issues. And I think we've just not been very effective at doing that as a party. And I would do my level best to contribute to that outcome.
Okay, so we are going to allow each of you 1 minute to give kind of your closing pitch. And what I would say to all of you and to you as you think about doing this, that one of the reasons for this purpose is that you all have the opportunity to be delegates at the Assembly for CD4 for one of these candidates, or if you're not sure, you can go into it undetermined and make up your mind at the Assembly. But we need you. Like Douglas County makes up 140 delegates or something?
127.
127.
55% of the delegates come from Douglas County.
So your role is critical, your message is critical. So with that, starting with you, Ike, you have 1 minute, not a minute and 5 seconds. 1
Trying
minute.
to be a good politician.
I know, watch Katie, she's got her sign.
Gotcha.
Okay, but you have 1 minute to make a closing pitch to these folks for tonight.
My closing pitch is pretty simple. We need to take a page out of Adam Frisch's playbook. If we have the candidate with the moderate message, and if we have the money, we can win these rough, tough, red rural districts. He proved it. We can win. We have raised over $355,000 just since Boebert declared in District 4. We are on pace to raise $1.5 million by the end of this quarter. My commitment is to each and every one of you. I love you, your families. I love my country. If I have the honor to serve in Congress as your representative, I will champion federal protections for the right to choose and ensure that we have somebody in office that you can trust.
So my very first endorsement was from my dad, and he was a Republican. He was a fiscal conservative Republican, worried about the rise of fascism in America. So I am going to ensure that I reach folks who are unaffiliated, people we haven't brought into the fold. And again, I have the experience doing that in the labor movement. We talk to working people across every single sector of the economy, across every single political affiliation of the economy. And let me say this, as a millennial woman, regardless of whether or not Lauren Boebert wins, we need to make sure her brand of politics loses everywhere. So I'm calling on Lauren to debate right here, right now, no matter what. She can go to colorado4.com, sign up for a time, we will meet her there. And I'm gonna keep calling on her to debate because America deserves a real discussion about the issues.
I think that what distinguishes me from my colleagues, all of whom are very impressive, is that I will say things that you may not want to hear. I believe it's important as a leader, as an elected official, to tell people what you think is the truth, the accurate assessment of the situation based on your understanding. And I will commit to that. That's the only way I can do this job. It's the only way I can go through life. Telling people what they want to hear, convincing them that they're magical solutions, that's not going to work anymore. And people will drift to other people with more compelling narratives, like what we see right now on the right. So I think we need truth-telling. I think that has to be across the board. I think we need to restore decency in politics. And I think that if we can accomplish that and get the message out to Republicans, there's an eagerness to really think differently about the situation that they find themselves in. I don't think Trump and Boebert, people like that, necessarily are getting traction. If they had an alternative, people would do differently. That's what I'm trying to say.
So in conclusion, I would like to let everybody know that I've been on the ground all year. January 1st was the first day that I explored my congressional campaign. The first county I showed up in was Morgan County, Weld County, and then I trickled through the process. I've been raising money all year, but I can tell you that in the last 3 weeks, we've far exceeded what we raised in all of last year. I can tell you that I have over 10 years of campaign experience. I have a STEM background. I was on the ground in Pennsylvania in 2020 to help deliver a win for Joe Biden, and that was one of my biggest accomplishments. I will fight for this district relentlessly, but I want to let everybody know that I'm going to be a representative. I have my own ideals and my own prerogatives, but I don't have to be the smartest individual in the room. I just have to be the best listener. And I'm making sure that I'm building a campaign team that is diverse and skilled and talented and can help me, because this is going to be a team effort. This is not a John Fedora thing. This is a CD4 effort, and I'm going to make everybody very proud. Please, I would love to have you as delegates at Douglas County Convention. Thank you.
So first, thank you to all four of you for showing up here. I've had the pleasure of knowing some of them longer than others, but the opportunity to get to know them all very, very well. And so I very much appreciate you being here and talking about the issues, and I hope that you will continue to participate in these forums. I think it's important. I constantly say we need to show up, and we need to make sure that each of you and everyone throughout CD4 knows that their voice and their vote counts. And part of that is the work that you all are doing. So thank you for being here for that.